Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I wanted to show really an immortal game that was played in 1984 between Emil Joseph Diemer against Thomas Heilling, and this game was really incredible. Maybe it's not one of the best chess games of all times, but it's really one of the wildest chess games of all times, because you see now by Emil Joseph Diemer 17 consecutive pawn moves in the opening. So without playing any minor piece move, here Emil Joseph Diemer played 17 consecutive moves in the beginning. Really wild stuff. I'm not sure we'll find where you'll find a similar game like this, because maybe there are maybe some other games with 10, 11, 12 pawn moves in the later stages of the game, but here Emil Joseph Diemer played 17 consecutive moves, which was really wild. And Emil Joseph Diemer was really interesting when it comes to chess history. He was part of the Nazi party, which was, I think, wild enough, and later on he also was in a mental institution. He was also a chess journalist who has written many articles for Nazi players back in the 40s, and his contribution to the chessboard is because of its Blackmar-Diemer gambit. If you're familiar with this gambit line, d4, and then after something like d5, we can play the move f3 and then knight to f6, and here the move e4 is called the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. First, Blackmar was recognized because of this opening line, but because Diemer played this opening very often, then this opening has its name as the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. And what's also interesting about this guy Diemer is that he won one game against Efim Bogolyubov in the so-called England gambit. After move here d4 and e5, he won one game against Efim Bogolyubov, and he won also one game against Alexander Alekhine. So I think these are really some interesting facts, but still the fact that he joined the Nazi party, I think, is something that bothers me, at least for a little bit. But still, I wanted to show you this game because it deserves to be here on our list of the best chess games of all times, because it's really incredible. 17 consecutive moves in the opening. So let's check out now the game. Here, as promised, d4, of course, a pawn move in the beginning here by Emil Joseph Diemer. Here, after the move d4, we have knight to f6 by Heilling, and now f3. What Diemer probably hoped for is again this move d5, and then he would probably play his Blackmar-Diemer gambit. But okay, here in the game, Heilling played the move d6. We have now e4, and basically it becomes now sort of a normal fianchetto attack. If, for instance, black plays the move g6, then we would reach maybe this 150 attack positions with knight to c3, bishop to e3, queen to d2. But okay, Heilling played here the move with g6. Still, we can play g4. Nothing wrong so far with this move, because still we can play from white's perspective knight to c3, bishop to e3, and queen to d2, h4, h5. So, but okay, here again, Heilling played bishop to g7. We have now a new pawn move, g5. Attacking the knight, and now knight to d7. Probably a slightly better way is here to proceed with knight to h5, because the knight would then control both of the squares. You couldn't then proceed with h4, then knight to g3 could happen. But okay, knight to d7 also not a bad choice here for black, with opportunities then to break the position here with a potential c5 move. Here after move f4, a new pawn move again by Diemer, and here after move c5, we have now d5. It is a little bit strange here to put these pawns like this, because of course we can notice now that you have two advanced pawns, which are creating of course a space advantage, but these pawns can be broken with e6, f6, even h6 is, I think, a possibility here for black. b5 could be an also opportunity to expand on the queen side, but what you shouldn't do, I think, so far from black's perspective, is to castle now immediately, because I think you have to break a little bit first the pawn structure in the center with some pawn moves, and then try to castle, or at least develop here on the queen side. So that's why here Thomas Heilling found so far a good move, b5, because you cannot take bishop to b5. It's not an opportunity, because you get queen to a5, and then you could cover maybe with the knight to c3. But now after bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and then queen to b5 is going on, then it's simply a lost position for white. So after the move b5, at least you see black found a way how to expand on the queen side with a great tempo. In the continuation, c3 has been played by Heilling, and now pardon me, by Diemer, and now a6 by Heilling. He's fixing now the pawn structure on the queen side. Here in the continuation of the game, Diemer tried, of course, now a new pawn move. We're now in move 9, again a pawn move, h4, and the position is about equal. The engine is not saying that white is worse here. The position is about equal because we still have opportunities to push the pawn on h5, and probably black should have proceeded with the move h5 now. Blocking the king side, I think it's a good decision. At least white cannot make progress anymore on that side of the board. But I'm sure if black would have played the move h5, that Diemer would have played probably the move a4, a new pawn move, of course. I'm not sure what was going on in his head, but maybe he was doing this intentionally to make this game more attractive, because he was really wild guy, this guy Diemer. So after move a4, of course, black is in this position, I think, also some serious troubles on the a file. So, but okay, after the move h4, here Heilling played the move knight to b6, protecting the c4 square, but also the a4 square. Never ever allow white to proceed here on the queen side, because of course white has an expansion on the king side, but if white manages also to create some spaces on the queen side, then black would be simply to push too far away. But actually here Diemer found a great move. He played now first the move h5, after move e6, now h6, a new pawn move, bishop to f8, and now this move is really brilliant. It's the move a4, because if you take knight takes a4, then you get c4, paralyzing, I think, a little bit the position on the queen side, because you cannot take b takes c4, you lose simply the knight. So that's why this idea to temporarily sacrifice a pawn on the queen side, it's really brilliant. If you take, of course, with the pawn b takes a4, then you have weakened the pawn structure too much on the queen side. This is then a long-term weakness. Also the pawn on a6 is a long-term weakness, and I think strategically white is much better. So that's why after the move a4, here in the continuation of the game, Heilling took here with e takes d5. Now we have a5 attacking the knight, a new pawn move, knight to d7, and now e takes d5, a new pawn move. Really wild stuff. So you see now no minor piece activity so far, but the good part, I think, for white here is that these bishops are still controlling these two diagonals, and the also good thing is, I think, you can play very fast with your knight. Knight to f3 can happen, knight to d2, queen can also come on a very active square. So far still white has some kind of an activity with the minor pieces, although the pieces haven't participated in the game so far. So in the game, bishop to e7 played by Heilling. We have now a new pawn move, c4, really wild stuff. And now after move f6, we have c takes b5, we have f takes g5, and now here f5. This was now the last move by Diemer with the pawn. After move f5, he's now trying, of course, to break the position on the king side by creating some weaknesses. And here in the continuation of the game, Heilling took g takes f5, and actually black is better in this position, although the king is naked. Although Diemer had the opportunity to play the move queen to h5, a better idea, I think, instead of this move f5 was simply to proceed here with the move b6. b6 would paralyze further the queen side. This was now the suggested move by the engine. I think this move is very pragmatic, because in the continuation of the game you can play simply knight to c3. If g takes f4 happens, then you get out with your bishop with the tempo. Even if you get checked, I think you can escape here, king to d2, then maybe king to c2. The pawn on d5 is protecting us, knight to c3, bishop to d3, knight to f3 could happen. Still you're vulnerable to some attacks. I think black would be in much more trouble to secure the king by castling. If you castle, then the g file, the h file is already opened, and black could be in serious trouble. But okay, after move f5, here g takes f5, and the queen comes out now with the tempo, queen to h5, a check, and we're now in the move 18. So you see 17 consecutive moves here played by Diemer, only with pawns. After move queen to h5, we have king to f8, knight to f3, attacking the pawn on g5 now 3 times. So that's why rook to g8, and now b6. Now comes this idea. You see, Diemer has here a great expansion on the queen side with the pawns, has now a clear plan how to attack further the position. We want, of course, grab now these 2 pawns and still include, of course, also our knight into the game, maybe knight to c3, knight to e2, knight to f4, knight to g3. So we're searching basically for good squares with this knight on b1, then trying to develop it on some better squares. So here bishop to b7, attacking the pawn, of course knight to c3. We have knight to f6, attacking the queen, and now knight takes g5. Finally, Diemer has his pawn back. Here I think Thomas Heilling was a little bit careless, because now this tactical sequence is better for white. After knight to h5, we have, of course, also the opportunity to create a fork here from white's perspective. Knight to e6, king to e8, and now knight takes d8. We have now knight to g3, the fork. But okay, Diemer has now the opportunity to take out the bishop. Here the continuation, Heilling took also the knight on h1, the rook on h1, but now bishop to f4 happens, and the d6 is now a long-term weakness. Although black is up the exchange, but the activity now with the minor pieces of white is simply too much to handle. The pawn on d6 is weak. The knight is not so good. The knight doesn't have so many good squares to escape. The activity, as we said, of the minor pieces is perfectly fine, and the problem is now you have to lose many tempi in order to include your knight into the game. Here rook to g6 played by Heilling, and now queenside castling is even a possibility here for Diemer. We have knight to f2 attacking the rook, and now rook to e1. This is now already a very dangerous attack. You see, these 2 pieces are aiming against the d6 square. This rook is creating this very annoying pin, so that's why king to d7 was pretty much a force move. Maybe king to f7 is slightly better. At least you're getting out of this tactical mess, because there are many pieces you see now on the queen side. Maybe it would be a good choice to give up simply the d6 pawn and escape with your king to the square g8. But okay, king to d7. Now comes really the best move of this game. I think it's time for you maybe to pause the video and then to try now to see the best tactical sequence here for white, because there is this one rule in chess: whenever you feel that all of your pieces are on best squares, but maybe one piece is simply not, it's simply time to improve the position of this minor piece by finding a new square, finding a new attacking square. And if we evaluate now this position, I think this bishop is perfectly fine. Although this bishop hasn't played so far, I think the activity of the bishop is perfectly fine. The bishop on f4 is also perfectly fine. The rook is perfectly fine, and the knight is perfectly fine. Pawn moves are not good anymore. There are no good pawn moves. So the only piece that needs improvement here is this knight on c3. And that's why here Diemer played knight to b5. The problem is now, if you take a takes b5, then you get checkmated here with bishop to b5, and the game is simply lost. You don't have so many good squares. You will simply lose also this position. Here in the continuation of the game, we have now rook to e7 as a possibility. Knight to d6 will happen, and also rook to e8 here is a possibility. So it's simply the position that black needs to resign. So after knight to b5, you cannot take the knight. So that's why here Heilling tried knight to e4 to somehow, of course, block the position. But of course, here Diemer has some other plans. Rook takes e4, a great exchange sacrifice. If you take here f takes e4, then you get bishop to h3, and again it's a bad position. You have only one square, but then you simply lose the battle here around the square d6. You can maybe take out, but here I think with the knight takes d6 and then knight to e4, simply pushing the pawn here further. Also this knight could come again to b7. We can also attack this this pawn. Also some ideas of bishop to c8, and then maybe bishop to b7 are also very good. Trapping the rook is here also great opportunity. So that's why again black is simply lost. So after move rook to e4, Heilling recognized his problems. He played now rook to g1, but okay, here Diemer simply retreated with the rook to e1. We have rook to f1, rook takes f1, and here Heilling tried a different way. He tried now a takes b5, because white doesn't have any more the light square bishop. White cannot include the bishop here on b5. This was also sort of a tactical idea by Heilling, but it's again too late, because Diemer has now the opportunity opportunity to include the rook into the game. Rook to g1, now rook to g7 is also an opportunity in the continuation of the game. Here king to c8 was played, but now knight to d6. We have bishop to d6, bishop to d6, and now knight to d7. Finally this knight gets out, but it's a little bit too late, because now the rook can of course occupy first the 8th rank, and after king to b7, now the rook can also occupy the 7th rank, and it's simply a lost endgame here for black. King to c8 was played. Here rook takes h7 is a possibility, simply too much material that black has lost here. Here rook takes a5, again simply too late. There are now many great ways how to win the game, but here Diemer found this one. b7, deflecting the king from the defense of the knight. If you try of course king to d8, it's not so good. Then you get rook to h8. You can maybe cover here, but now we can here pretty simply promotion of the queen, because the knight has left the defense of the b8 square. So that's why here after b7, king to b7, rook takes d7. Now king to c8, h7, here a couple of checks, and here after move h8 we have a promotion of the queen. King takes d6, queen to d8, king to e5, and now after d6 in this position Thomas Heilling resigned. So really wild stuff. First 17 moves only with pawns. Brilliant attack here by Emil Joseph Diemer. Maybe it wasn't, as I said, one of the best tactical and strategical chess games of all times, but it was for sure, I think, one of the wildest chess games of all times, with some brilliant ideas in chess, pushing simply pawns. It's really wild. So I think still that this game deserves to be on our list, the best chess games of all time. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more brilliancies like this, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's the link. And if you maybe want to see the best chess games played by engines, check my best chess games of engines. Here also are very nice playlists with some brutal attacks played by Stockfish, Lila C0, Alpha 0, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.